So I got asked to talk about how to write a good essay. So I know this isn't Japanese related, but let's talk about it. And to begin just by giving my qualifications, like why should you listen to me? Yeah, I'm just some guy, but I am a guy who has done a lot of writing, academic writing, and I'd like to think I'm okay at it. I've been in academia for less than 10 years, and I have like 20 or so publications out. There's about 4 or 5 more coming out over the next year, and that includes 2 books. And all in all, if I can just toot my own horn a bit, I have been told that I write quite well. Reviews of, at least like in an academic sense. Reviews of the book I have coming out next year, both reviewers called it enjoyable, with one saying the writing was one of the best qualities of the book. So hopefully what all this means is that I'm able to give some practical advice that will help you get similar feedback on the writing that you're doing. I know this is the internet though, so if you gotta go right now, my one tip is just write. The best way to get good at writing, no matter what style of writing it is write. It doesn't matter if it's terrible, it doesn't matter if it's trash. You get to good writing by writing, and it's fine if it takes a whole lot of really bad writing to get you there. Don't hesitate, you don't need to edit while you're writing, just put it out in the world, and as you do that, you will get better and better. That said, let's move into 5, I'll be as quick and concrete as I can, tips that I have to improve your specifically academic writing, as the write more feedback could go for kind of any style of writing whatsoever. So number 1, read. If you want to get good at academic writing, it's important to read a lot of academic literature. That can just be the essays in class. Usually a teacher will assign like extra stuff, and I know you're like, oh, I'm extra work in class, but actually reading that can be helpful. And I don't just mean like passively read, I mean read critically. And I don't just mean critically as in like, don't trust everything the academic says, although you know you shouldn't do that. But honestly, think about if you liked the article, why? And if you didn't like the article, why not? Because seeing what styles and what approaches make something readable and enjoyable to you within academic reading, which is not known for being very enjoyable, can be very, very helpful. To give 2 examples from my own personal life that hopefully don't get me ostracized from the entire sociolinguistics community, as someone who does sociolinguistics, it is basically vital that I am familiar with the work of Michael Silverstein and Asif Agha. Now, Silverstein is a brilliant scholar, but he is a terrible writer. He's so thick and impenetrable that his Wikipedia page mentions how hard it is to access his work. But reading him was important for me to become more accessible, as I wanted to make sure I didn't do some of the things he did. And so I've actually learned what not to do, what to avoid in my own research. More practically though, Agha is a lot more clear, but can still be quite impenetrable. And one thing he does is that he starts with a very, very simple explanation, and then it gets more and more and more complex until your brain's about to explode. And then he finally provides a very concrete example of what he's talking about, that it's very based in kind of real conversation, real world, and that helps tie everything together. But in watching him do that, in reading his books and seeing him do that technique, I felt that actually those examples needed to come earlier. So something that I now try to do in my own style is to sprinkle examples throughout whenever possible as I build towards the complexity, and I find that to be more beneficial. So while my thinking has been heavily influenced by both of these, my writing has as well. One in kind of a I don't want to do that sense, and the other saying, okay, this is working for me, but I actually want more handrails, I want more guidance, as I learn how to write in an academic style, which is still kind of approachable. And this brings me to my second piece of advice, which is don't try to write in like academic ease. I'm guessing if you're watching this video, you're not like a full-time academic, but you're a university student, a high school student, something like that, who has to write essays for class. A teacher at your level is not expecting and does not want you to write thick, impenetrable academic prose. What they want you to see is you be able to synthesize and explain the thick academic prose that you probably read in class in your own words as something that is very, very accessible. So while you shouldn't write like, yo, teach, I'm gonna drop some knowledge on the Riz in this essay that you made us read. Like, no, like you gotta go, semi-formal, at least write kind of like you're writing an informative or interesting blog kind of style. But don't stress about like making yourself sound smart. You'll sound smart by showing the teacher who understands the article they assigned that you also understand it and you can express it in clearer words than the author. You're not contributing a new theory to academia. You're not analyzing new data. You're usually just expressing understanding of one or more articles. And for instance, in more advanced essays, perhaps showing the links between them and what they tell us about a bigger story than either article says. But doing that in simple, clear vocabulary that doesn't hide the fact that you understand what's going on is helpful and will probably lead to a better grade than you trying to access a register you don't really know. I know it feels weird, but because as a native speaker, you feel like you should just be able to do everything in English that anyone else can. But in reality, learning like the academic register of a language takes a lot of time. It's almost like learning not another language, but like learning another dialect. And we don't expect you to know that. We don't want you to use that necessarily. We want to see originality, synthesis, and intelligence. And we've had, trust me, a lot of students submit essays that use kind of their best shot at sounding academic to hide the fact that they don't really understand what is being said. So don't hesitate to start with a simple style and then build it up. Use complexity, use difficult terms when you need to describe something in very, very complex or very specific terms, but don't feel pressure to do it throughout your entire essay. Number 3, budget time for editing. This is the biggest thing I see. People look at the deadline, they make sure they have their essay done by the deadline, they submit it just before the deadline, and it's just not as good as it can be. If you have the talent to write a passing essay right before the deadline, if you think you work best under pressure, I mean, good luck, you might pass, the essay might be good, but you're not actually going to develop your skills as a writer. One of the most important things you can do is make sure you have time to read what you've written and work on it. Does everything connect really well? Do the paragraphs flow together? Are you telling a story? Yes, this is academic writing, but my dad once told me that he doesn't like the term creative writing because all writing is creative, and I agree. There's a difference between a novel and an academic essay, yeah, but you still need to show a narrative, a creativity. Does that narrative flow? Is everything in the section it needs to be? Are your arguments making sense? These are all things that are really important, but they're not things you're going to be able to access unless you spend time editing. If you're just writing 1,000 to 2,000 words, yeah, editing can take just a few hours. But if you're sending like a 10,000, 15,000 word assignment, I would budget like a whole week for editing. For me personally, what I do is I work and edit my work until I can't even bear to look at it. Like when my brain is telling me, if you make me read this one more time, I swear I'll just shut off and end your life right now. Then I go, okay, I'm in a good place. I've spent as much time on this. This is as good as I can make it. It's time to set it off for review. And that does take at least 2 or 3 days minimal, even after all the experience I've had. In editing a book, I probably spend weeks and weeks reading it and rereading it, putting it aside, coming back to it later because sometimes time can help me revisit it. But that editing is something I see a lot of people not doing. And if you want to get better at essay writing, not pass a single essay, but actually get better at it, learning how to address your mistakes, thinking about how to write better is going to be very, very helpful. As for what to look for during editing though, beyond just kind of reading things out loud and seeing if you like how they sound, a few really, really concrete tips that I go for are 1, avoid adverbs. Adverbs, in my opinion, are generally not that useful. I wouldn't say like no adverb, but do check, see every single adverb. Is it actually adding anything or is there a better way to say it? 2, avoid the passive voice whenever possible. It's a legacy of really old academic writing, and in the contemporary academic writing, we don't really use it as much. It sounds awkward and forced. 3, anaphora is very bad. And by this, I mean words like this, that, these, those, etc. Check anytime you use a word that references back to something and make sure that that's the only thing it could possibly link to, because a lot of times a very unclear anaphora where the word this, these, those, that, etc. could refer to multiple items, create confusion. And finally, always ask yourself, can I be writing this simpler and can I be writing this clearer? I suggest you write as if your imagined audience are like troglodytes who barely climbed out of caves and can only kind of read. And I know that sounds mean, but not taking your audience for granted, assuming they don't understand anything that you know, can be very, very helpful in making sure that it is accessible beyond the people that are thinking just what you're thinking. One major miss that can happen during editing is that you read, but you read as yourself, so you already know what you mean. And if you're reading and thinking, okay, could somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about access this? Now, in academia and essay writing, the answer is probably no, but get as close as you can. Try to remove your assumptions. Try to think like, what if my reader is really, really tired, really, really bored, and in a bad mood? Am I forcing them to understand or assume things, or am I helping them? Am I guiding them through the essay? That sort of perspective where you ask, does this make sense, or does it just make sense to me as the author, will help a lot. And this leads into point 4, which is what to do when you're trying to edit, but you've hit a block and you just can't fix it. And for that, I suggest rubber ducky debugging. Now, this is something that I learned about from the world of coding, where apparently people who code will sometimes, if they find a problem with their code and they can't figure out how to fix it, explain the problem to a rubber duck like they're talking to a rubber duck. In doing so, they have to explain something in very, very simple terms. Rubber ducks are not really that great at, coding. You can do that with your essay. If you hit a block and try to think, okay, there's a problem here, something's not working, but I can't figure out where it is. I can't figure out what's in the wrong place. I can't figure out what about my argument is not landing to me when I read it back. Rubber ducky debugging can be very, very helpful in that. Take a NUI, take a plushie, take something, and talk it through like it's, a plushie. And through that, you can hopefully access the problem. One of the worst experiences I've had as a writer was when I was working on my PhD, and I prepared a 10 to 15,000 word analysis section, one of the most important sections of my thesis. And I showed it to my supervisors, and both of them were like, we're sorry, but this doesn't work. This is a flop. And it was devastating. It was, months of work, but rubber ducky debugging was literally what I did to figure out what was wrong. Yeah, that was a lot of time. It was sad. It took me a while to, get back on the horse and start going again, but I wouldn't have been able to write the good version without writing the bad version, because that helped me know what absolutely wouldn't work. And so yeah, again, that budgeting time for editing that I mentioned earlier works with this and allowed me to succeed in this area. Number 5 is signpost. In high school, secondary school, at least I hope they're still teaching this, a common thing that people say when writing an essay is signpost. Have your introduction, have your, this is the body, have your conclusion. I think a lot of people think this is stuff for beginners, but no, it's good. It's good. I do it even nowadays. Having an introduction that says, in this paper, I'm going to do this, and then says, here's how the paper is going to break down. Having clear statements, like at the start of your body, at the bottom of the body analysis section saying, this is what I'm going to do, and at the end summarizing, I did this, a conclusion that sums everything up. These are useful, and these kind of structures can help guide you. They're helpful to both the reader and the writer. They help not only clarify to the reader what's going to happen and what has happened, but help make sure that you can explain to yourself what is going to happen and what has happened. A lot of people, when they write, for instance, novels, they'll start, with a whole guide of who the characters are, what the major plot points are, how they're going to be developed. This is kind of the same thing, but in academia, saying that in this section I will, and then finally in this section I did. Make it easier to fill out the middle, make it easier to make sure that the middle matches what it's supposed to. So don't think you're too good for signposting just because you're, in university. Instead, embrace it as a fundamental thing that helps a good essay become a good essay. To this point, I kind of have a 5.5, maybe 6 piece of advice, which is just do not use ChatGPT or AI software at all. I know I'm going to sound like I'm a Luddite here or something like that. And again, if you're just trying to pass an essay, then I guess you don't do what you want, get ideas. But if you really want to get good at writing, which is the goal of this video is not how to get an A on one assignment, it's how to be a better essay writer. You need to try these various techniques and start from scratch. You need to produce really, really bad stuff, rather than have somebody just say, oh no, here's a good outline you can start from. No, get to that outline yourself. Go through the steps. Fail. Write absolute trash. And then work on it. Edit it, make it better. Try again next time. Going through these steps, learning how to get there will get you to a point where you not only become a better writer, but you feel like a better writer. You feel more confident and you know what you're doing. You can sit down with a blank document, start writing, and follow a technique that works for you. And you're never going to find that if you have somebody jump you way ahead of these and give you the breakdown of your own essay, or give you the phrasing that you're looking for. If you want to develop your own voice, just like if you want to develop your own style as a musician, as a painter, creative writer, it requires finding your own way of going through these challenges. There is no one way of writing an essay. There is no one way of being readable or being accessible, being fun to read. But finding a way requires the work. But if you are interested in getting there, I hope that this video gave you some of those concrete examples. And if you're not, and you somehow made it all the way to the end, I will have Japanese content coming back very, very soon. But hey, I like to answer requests when I get them, so I'm doing that here. Happy writing. See you next time.